Welcome to the speakeasy. Behind a door with no sign, under a ceiling painted with stars, 3 chairs wait. Tonight's topic is one that polite conversation usually avoids, but we are not a polite conversation. Tonight we talk about the transition. About people who began a medical transition and then, months or years later, chose to stop. And we talk about one chart in particular, a young woman born with the sun in Pisces, the moon in Libra, and Taurus rising, with the fixed star Algol burning on the ascendant itself. At 19, she chose to stop the testosterone after 7 months, cold turkey. At 21, she tells us her body feels incredible, and her heart feels broken. That split, the body saying yes while the psyche says help, is the whole episode in one image. We'll read her chart the old way and the new way. We'll talk about what the brain science says about decision-making at 19, and about a brain that never stops changing. We'll talk about testosterone and voice, and hairline, and breasts that never came. And we'll ask what the sky and the synapse can teach us together, without politics, without slogans, with the candle lit and the record spinning. I'm your host. Pour something warm. This is the Speakeasy.
And what a chart that is. The ancients would have read that ascendant and whispered the Gorgon's name. Algol, the head of Medusa, the most feared fixed star in the old catalogues. But the old astrologers also knew that the most dangerous stars carry the greatest medicine, if you survive the looking.
And I would say, survive the looking is exactly what she has been doing. The identity she explored was real as any identity a 19-year-old can hold. What changed was the answer to the question, is this me, or is this a season of me?
Before we talk about anything else, let us put the chart on the table. Sun in Pisces, moon in Libra, Taurus ascending, and that ascendant sitting directly on Algol, at about 15 degrees of Taurus. 3 voices, 1 sky. Trad, start us off the old way.
Gladly. In the traditional method we begin with the ascendant, because the ascendant is the gate, the body, the face you show the world, the first breath. Taurus rising gives a body built for endurance, solid, patient, sensual, slow to move and harder to move once settled. The ruler of that ascendant is Venus, which means the planet of love and form governs the whole life vehicle. Then the sun in Pisces, the 12th sign sun, the most private placement in the wheel, identity that wants to dissolve rather than declare, a self that is porous to everything around it. And the moon in Libra, the need for harmony, for relationship, for the mirror of another person to know who one is. Put those together, and you have a person whose sense of self is negotiated, between body and spirit, between self and other, between what is and what might be.
And that is precisely the postmodern reading too, just in different language. The Pisces sun is the ego with permeable boundaries, the psyche that absorbs the moods of the room. The Libra moon is the relational self, formed in the eyes of others. And Taurus rising is the anchor, the body, the physical reality that will not be argued with. When you put a Libra moon in charge of self-knowledge, you get someone who asks other people who she is. And when you put that under the pressure of a culture that offers a definitive answer, you can see how a young person might take the offered name and wear it.
So the chart itself, the old sky and the new sky agree, describes someone whose identity is relational, porous, and anchored in the body. Keep that triad in your mind. Porous identity, relational mirror, bodily anchor. It is going to matter in every chapter that follows. And now, Trad, the fixed star.
Let me speak plainly about Algol, because she deserves the truth of her own sky. Algol, Beta Persei, is the blinking star, the demon star, the head of Medusa. In the ancient catalogues it is listed among the most violent and unfortunate: beheading, loss, catastrophe, the sudden removal of what you thought was yours. It sits at about 26 degrees of Taurus in the modern tropical zodiac, and in her chart it is conjunct the ascendant. To the old astrologers, that is a fearsome signature, the wound written on the face itself. The fixed star method is not fortune-telling, it is a lens on character and timing. Algol conjunct the ascendant does not doom her. It marks her. It says, your life will pass through a severance, and the quality of your entire life will be decided by how you carry what was cut. The sky does not cause the story. The sky rhymes with the story.
But here is the thing the old catalogues also knew, and the myths say it better than any table of dignities. Medusa was not born a monster. She was made one, violated in a temple, punished for the crime committed against her, and given a face that turned others to stone. The Gorgon is the trauma that becomes a weapon and then a wound. And when Perseus beheads her, what springs from her severed neck? The winged horse, Pegasus. The wound gives birth to the winged thing. That is Algol's real teaching. The beheading, the sudden, violent ending of something, is also the release of what was trapped inside. And the postmodern reading adds one layer. Algol on the ascendant is the face the world sees, and the face she sees in the mirror. When she looks in that mirror and sees a receding hairline and hears a deep voice, she is meeting the Gorgon's gaze. And the work, the whole work, is to not turn to stone.
And for a young woman who ended something suddenly, cold turkey, at 19, the beheading is not a metaphor. She ended a version of herself. The star on her ascendant says, this is your story's shape. Something will be cut away. And the question is only what flies out of the cut. Let's step back from the single chart now, and talk about how identity actually forms.
And the ancients would agree with that more than you might expect. They never said the birth chart was a destiny laid out in advance. They said it was a seed, a nature that unfolds through time, and the unfolding is shaped by choice, by culture, by the gods of the age. Ptolemy himself wrote that the stars incline, they do not compel. And imperfections, the years around 19 are ruled by the 9th and 10th houses, the houses of belief, of the public self, of taking a stand before the world. It is the age of ideology. It is precisely the age when a young person will embrace a total explanation of themselves, because the 9th house wants an answer with capital letters. The same sky that gave her the need for harmony gave her the age at which certainty is most seductive.
Let's talk about how identity actually forms, because that is the question underneath every other question tonight. The postmodern astrologers, and the depth psychologists behind them, treat the psyche not as a fixed thing but as a process. The self is not found, the self is composed, layer by layer, mirror by mirror, year by year. The Pisces sun knows this instinctively. The self is a mist that takes the shape of its container. And here is the hardest part of the modern story. A young person at 16 or 19 is asked to answer a question that the entire history of philosophy has not settled. Who am I? And we, the culture, the clinics, the algorithms, we have started answering it for them, with confidence and with hormones. The Libra moon is the seismograph of that era. She feels the expectations of the room like pressure. If the room says, the way you feel is who you are, and the way to be true to it is to change the body, then a Libra moon will weigh that, balance it, and finally agree, because agreement is what Libra does. Not out of weakness, out of a genuine, almost constitutional need for harmony between inner and outer. The tragedy is not that she chose. The tragedy is that the culture offered her a choice that the culture itself was not sure about, and presented it as certainty.
Now the facts of this particular story, as she tells them. She began testosterone, exogenous testosterone, at 19, and took it for 7 months. Then she stopped. Cold turkey. No taper, no weaning, no plan, just a stop. She's now 21, roughly 2 years out from the last injection or gel application. No surgeries. Never had any. And the changes that happened in those 7 months were significant. Voice deepening, a receding hairline, and breast development that never happened. Small breasts, as she describes them, with no real development. What she describes, physically incredible, emotionally shattered, is not a contradiction. It is the exact signature of an exogenous hormone stopped suddenly. Testosterone changes the body fast. The psyche changes slowly. The body says, I have more energy, I am stronger, I feel the ground under me. The psyche says, who did I become, and can I get her back? The two clocks, the body's clock and the psyche's clock, were never synchronized, and the cold stop broke the coupling entirely. Stopping a sex hormone cold turkey is a physiological event, not just a psychological one. The endocrine system does not like sudden silence any more than sudden noise.
7 months. In the old reckoning, that is 1 lunar cycle of the body's alchemy, the time it takes for a full season of the self to turn. The tradition speaks of the body as the temple of the chart. Taurus, the sign on her ascendant, rules the throat and the physical form. To change the body is to redraw the temple. And to do it for 7 months, and then stop, is to begin a rebuilding that the tradition would say takes at least as long as the demolition. The chart has one more thing to say here. The moon, the fastest moving body, rules her need for emotional equilibrium, and the moon in Libra is the most relational of all lunar placements. A sudden break, a sudden stop, an abrupt ending of a defining chapter, this is a moon signature event. She did not merely stop a drug. She stopped a story, and stopping a story takes more than the body's clock to recover from.
The two clocks, the body's clock and the psyche's clock, were never synchronized, and the cold stop broke the coupling entirely. The body heals faster than the story does. And that split, the physical relief and the emotional collapse, is the body's axis snapping back, overshooting, and leaving the mood regulation system to find its own level in the dark.
Let's get clinical for a chapter, because the science matters and it is genuinely beautiful. The human brain is not finished at puberty, and it is not finished at 21, and it is not finished at 30. The prefrontal cortex, the region behind the forehead that does long-term planning, impulse control, consequence weighing, and the imagining of a future self, is among the last regions to fully mature. Its development continues through the mid-20s. Meanwhile, the emotional circuitry, the amygdala, the reward systems, comes online early and burns hot. So the science and the sky agree on the deepest point. A decision made at 19 about the body is a decision made by a self that is still, literally, under construction. Not a mistake, a draft. And drafts get revised. The brain is always growing, always developing, always changing. The same plasticity that let her commit to a transformation at 19 is the plasticity that lets her transform again at 21, and again at 30, and at 50. The brain is not a prison sentence. It is a conversation that never ends.
And the traditional astrologers, in their own language, made the same claim. The chart unfolds by time lords, perfections, annual revolutions, the planetary periods of the life. They never read a chart as a photograph of a finished person. They read it as a growth ring, a sequence of chapters, each with its own ruler, each with its own task. The idea that a person is complete at 19, the tradition would have found almost comically arrogant.
This is the brain's own astrology, if you'll forgive me. The ancients said the soul enters the body gradually, and modern neuroscience says the same thing in the language of myelination and synaptic pruning. The self at 19 is not the self at 25, and the self at 25 is not the self at 40. This is not a defect. It is the design. A brain that kept its adolescent plasticity forever would never specialize. A brain that specialized too early would never adapt. We are built to change, slowly, unevenly, for a lifetime.
Now the endocrine reality, plainly. Testosterone, exogenous testosterone, masculinizes. In 7 months, she experienced the classic effects. The voice deepens permanently, because the vocal folds thicken and that change does not reverse. The hairline recedes, androgenic alopecia, which may partially recover or may not, depending on genetics. And breast development, which had not yet occurred, was arrested. The hormonal environment was no longer estrogen dominant, and the tissue that would have formed never formed. Small breasts. No development. Those are the facts she reports, and they are consistent with the pharmacology. Some changes are reversible: fat distribution, muscle mass, energy levels, the cessation of further masculinization. Some are not. The voice, the hairline's permanent recession, the breast tissue that never formed. Reversibility is not a moral category. It is a physiological one. And knowing which is which, that is the beginning of any honest reckoning with the body, and any honest medicine that serves the person rather than the ideology.
The ancients would not have been surprised that the body keeps its ledger. They called the body the lower zodiac, the physical correspondence of the celestial pattern. Taurus on the ascendant rules the throat, and it is the throat, the voice, that changed first and stays changed. The tradition would note the poetry: the sign that rules the voice is the sign that was silenced. The deep voice is not just a physical fact, it is a permanent inscription on the ascendant itself. And the tradition would add one more layer: the doctrine of the 2 puberties. The first puberty is the body's own, endogenous, timed by the sky of the birth chart's rulers, unfolding over years. The second puberty, the one she initiated at 19, is exogenous, timed by a prescription, compressed into months. The body does not forget which one was which. And the integration of the two, the endogenous and the exogenous, the natural and the chosen, is the alchemical task of her whole life. That is not a curse. It is simply her work.
And here is where astrology earns its keep, I think, because the psychological astrologer does not say, the voice is a tragedy. The voice is a fact. The body is not wrong for having changed. The body is the body. What the psyche must do is integrate the fact, grieve what was lost, accept what remains, and re-inhabit the body as it is now, not as it might have been. The Taurus anchor, the very sign that makes her solid and grounded, is the sign that demands she live in the body she actually has.
Let's be careful with language, because the word detransition carries so much weight. For her, detransition does not mean she was never who she said she was. It does not mean her feelings at 19 were fake. It means she was in a process, and the process changed. The identity she explored was real as any identity a 19-year-old can hold. What changed was the answer to the question, is this me, or is this a season of me? And her own words deserve to be quoted, because they are so precise. She says she feels incredible, physically. And she has depression, regardless. Both true. The body rebounded. Energy, strength, the sense of the ground returning. And the psyche did not rebound at all, it went dark. That split is the detransition experience in a sentence. The body heals faster than the story does. Not a cautionary tale. Not a victory. A human story in process, with the sky above it and the science around it. Both saying the same thing. This is not the end of the chapter. The chapter is still being written.
The tradition would recognize this as a Saturn return shadow, the years before the first Saturn return, roughly 28 to 30, when the self is asked to become accountable to itself. But at 19 and 21, the task is earlier and harder, to reclaim authorship of one's own narrative after having handed it to the culture, the clinic, or the mirror. The ancients called this the descent, the catabasis, the journey into the underworld that precedes any genuine rebirth. She is in the descent now. The descent is not the destination, it is the passage.
And the psychological reading would add, she is grieving. Grief is not depression's failure, it is depression's honest root. She is grieving the girl who might have been, the breasts that never came, the hairline that receded, the voice that deepened, the 7 months that cannot be unlived. You cannot metabolize a loss you refuse to name. And our culture has been very bad at giving detransitioners permission to grieve, because to grieve is to say that something was lost. And the loudest voices on both sides do not want to hear that.
Now let's sit with the depression, because we cannot rush past it. She tells us she has depression, regardless. Regardless of the physical recovery. Regardless of being young, regardless of the future being long. The word regardless is doing so much work in that sentence. It says, my body's verdict and my psyche's verdict do not agree, and I am living in the gap. And clinically, we should be equally honest. Depression after an abrupt endocrine change is also a chemical event, the stress system, the receptors that were recalibrated by 7 months of testosterone and then suddenly reset. Psyche and soma are not rivals here. They are two languages for the same event. She does not need to choose between the chemistry and the meaning. She needs both acknowledged, and she needs care that treats both.
The moon in Libra again, and I keep returning to it because it is the most important single placement in this chart. The moon is the vessel of emotional memory, the receptive plate of the psyche. In Libra, it is tuned to relationship, to balance, to the approval of others. A Libra moon without a mirror, without a partner, a community, a validation, begins to doubt its own existence. Detransition has a way of emptying the room. Some friends stayed, some left. The online world that once affirmed her now regards her as a traitor to a cause, or as a victim of one. The mirror is gone, and the Libra moon, starved of its mirror, turns the gaze inward and finds only questions. The tradition would prescribe, for a moon in Libra under such strain, the old medicine of structure, daily ritual, fixed hours, the company of trustworthy friends, and the deliberate cultivation of beauty, because Libra is governed by Venus, and Venus heals through form, through art, through the small ceremonies of living. Not as distraction, as restoration.
Exactly. And this is where the evolutionary astrologer would point to the long arc rather than the acute wound. Depression, in the evolutionary frame, is often the psyche's way of forcing a pause, of stopping the momentum of a life that was moving in a direction the soul could not sustain. It is miserable. It is also information. The depression says, the old story is over, and the new story has not yet been written, and you must sit in the not yet. That is not a consolation, but it is a compass. And one more thing, from the evolutionary frame, the depression is not her identity. It is her weather. The chart did not give her a depression. The chart gave her a moon that feels deeply in a life that asked her to feel a severance. The depression is the cost of the feeling. And the same depth that makes the cost so high is the depth that will make her wisdom so rare. People who have descended and returned carry a gravity that the untouched do not have. She is being forged. It hurts. It is still forging.
We would be failing you if we did not name the larger room we are all standing in. The detransition question sits inside one of the most heated medical and policy debates of our time. Youth gender medicine, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones for minors and young adults, has been embraced by major medical organizations and then sharply restricted by several European health authorities, including England's, after the Cass Review. A sweeping independent assessment that found the evidence-based thin and long-term outcomes uncertain. The strongest recommendation was not a ban and not an endorsement, but caution and research. More evidence, longer studies, better support. A young person's gender journey should be allowed to be a journey, with waypoints, with reversals, with room to grow. The medicine should be as flexible as the brain it serves. And the person, not the policy, not the platform, should be the center of gravity.
And what does the sky say about a debate like this? The traditional astrologers would read the age itself, the precession of the equinoxes, the great year, and note that we are in the transition between ages, when old certainties dissolve before new ones crystallize. A culture that does not know what it believes will make its young people carry the uncertainty. That is not a political statement. It is an astrological and historical observation about the burden of transitional eras. The tradition would end this chapter with a simple doctrine. First, do no harm, but also, Do not confuse harm with change. Change is not harm. Grief is not harm. A voice that deepened and a hairline that receded are not harms visited upon her by a hostile world. They are facts of a body that lived a chapter. The harm, when harm occurs, is in the lie that there is only one true self, one right path, one irreversible destiny. The sky never said that. The sky says the seed unfolds, and the unfolding has seasons, and every season is real.
From the psychological side, both sides of this debate have been using young people as ammunition. The left uses trans joy and the right uses detransition grief, and the person in the middle, the 19-year-old who stopped, who grieves, who still does not know what she believes, becomes a talking point instead of a person. The healing frame is not pro-trans or anti-trans. It is pro-truth, pro-time, pro-care. The evidence does not support certainty on either side. The evidence supports humility, long follow-up, and the right to change one's mind without being destroyed for it.
Now we come to what we came for, the synthesis. We have spent the evening reading her chart the old way and the new way, and reading her body the clinical way and the symbolic way. Let us now lay out, as an original method, the protocol that holds all of it together. We call it the 7-layer synthesis, a reading of any life in transition that refuses to choose between the sky and the synapse. Layer 4. The neurodevelopmental clock. The prefrontal cortex matures into the mid-20s, plasticity is lifelong. A decision at 19 is a draft. The brain that made it is not the brain that must live with it, and the brain that lives with it can rewrite it. This is not an excuse, it is a design. Layer 6. The honest medicine. Reversible and irreversible must be named plainly. Care must be as flexible as the brain it serves. The evidence demands humility, long follow-up, and the right to change one's mind without being destroyed for it.
Layer 1. The fixed star threshold. For her, algal on the ascendant, the wound written on the face, the severance that is also a release. Every chart has its algal, its point of necessary loss. Name it first, because unnamed wounds run the show. Layer 3. The timing of the Lords. Perfections, planetary periods, the ages of ideology, 19 under the 9th and 10th, the age of certainty, the late 20s under Saturn, the age of accountability. The tradition does not read a decision in isolation, it reads the age that hosted it. And Layer 7. The return. Every descent has a return, the catabasis ends in anabasis, the rising. The tradition says the stars incline but do not compel. The psyche says the story is not over, the science says the brain is still becoming. She is 21, her hairline has receded, her voice is deep, her breasts did not develop. And none of that is the end of her, because none of it was ever the whole of her. The 7 layers are not a verdict. They are a map, and the map's only real instruction is, keep walking, and do not turn to stone.
Layer 2. The signatures of self. Pisces Sun, Taurus identity. Libra Moon, relational mirror. Taurus rising, bodily anchor. 3 signatures, 3 needs. To dissolve, to harmonize, to ground. A life is healthy when all 3 are honored in rotation, and it breaks when one is starved. Layer 5. The endocrine alchemy. Exogenous hormones change the body on one clock and the psyche on another. Stopping them suddenly breaks the coupling. The 2 puberties, endogenous and exogenous, must be integrated, not erased. Grief is the alchemical vessel in which that integration happens.
Last call at the speakeasy. The candle is low, the record has nearly finished, and we have to say what we came here to say. This episode was never really about astrology, and it was never really about the transition. It was about a young woman, 21 years old, Pisces sun, Libra moon, Taurus rising, Algol on the ascendant, who did something brave and something hard. She changed, and then she changed again. And she is still standing. To the young woman whose chart we read tonight, you are not a cautionary tale. You are not a political argument. You are a person in the middle of becoming, and becoming always looks unfinished from the inside. The door of the speakeasy is never locked. The candle is always lit. When you are ready, for the sky, for the science, or just for a warm drink and an honest conversation, you know where we are. Until then, breathe, walk, grieve, grow. The stars incline, and they do not compel. And the brain, your beautiful, unfinished brain, is still writing your story, sentence by sentence, day by day. Last call is not the end. It is just the pause before the next set. Good night, and clear skies.
The tradition gives us a final word for her, and it is not a horoscope, it is a blessing. Medusa's head was severed, and from the wound flew Pegasus. The Gorgon became the winged horse. The thing that terrified the world became the thing that carried heroes across the sky. That is the promise of Algol on the ascendant, not that you will escape the wound, but that the wound will become your wings. She will carry the voice. She will carry the hairline. She will carry the small breasts and the 7 months and the grief. And she will carry them the way Taurus carries the mountain, as the ground she stands on, not the weight that buries her.
The sky she was born under said, "Your self will be porous, your balance will be relational, your anchor will be your body." The sky did not say she would be broken. The sky said she would be asked to become, again and again. And the science said the same thing in its own tongue. The brain is always growing, always developing, always changing. She is not finished. She was never finished. None of us are.